Throwbacks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is a lovely Saturday today, and we have this show for you, which is all about us. We'd like to welcome your host, Mr. Al Hayward, and his special guest, Miss Suzette Speaks.
Yes, good afternoon,
everybody?
South Florida. My name is Al Hayward, and we have a special guest with us today.
I'm special?
Yes, you are special.
Hey, I feel special. Thank you, guys.
You are special. Suzette Speaks is with us this afternoon,
All right.
and we're going to have a lively discussion today about the cultural divide that exists in South Florida. I know some of you may be wondering what cultural divide, but it's there. It's rather obvious it's there, and we just wanted to shed some light on this issue because we feel as though it hinders our community from moving forward. And so, as we begin, I just want to give a little context to the conversation today. I'm not originally from South Florida. I was born in Boston and spent a number of years in Philadelphia, and I just recently came to South Florida about a year and a half ago. And since being here, I've noticed this cultural divide that exists, and we just wanted to shed some light on this issue today, and Suzette Speaks will tell you a little bit about where she's from and her context.
Hey, everybody. What's up? What's up? What's up? This is Mature Life Radio, and I'm so happy to be on today's show. It's about us now. I can sing a little bit, y'all. But anyway, I want to have a good time. You know, this can be a heavy subject matter, but I'm coming from the perspective of an immigrant or a child of immigrants. My parents are from Jamaica. Big up yachties, but. All right, I got that out the way. And but I grew up in Lauderdale Lakes, Florida. I don't know if you guys know where that is. It's, I guess you would call it a suburb of Fort Lauderdale. But I grew up in a mixed environment. And by mixed, I mean I had a lot of exposure, nice and early, to African American culture. And I also maintained through my parents a lot of my immigrant culture, being from the islands. So I call myself the best of both worlds. But in today's discussion, I'm not going to try to represent everybody. I really kind of feel like, you know, we get in trouble when we try to paint people with a broad brush, when we try to say everybody's this or everybody's that, or one type of group feels this way or another type of group feels that way. Being on what I guess I would call like a split decision right now, I love to just explore the topic and what we can do to make things better and to increase the communication that already exists and hopefully build some bridges.
Thank you, Suzette. First of all, let me just say that the purpose of this conversation is just to shed light on the issue that exists. And we're not trying to be divisive. We're actually just trying to, like Suzette said, build some bridges where we can see some of the things that keep us separated in our own personal lives.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, the first thing to solving any issue is to shed light on it. You know, if we don't acknowledge that there's an issue, it never gets addressed. It's like the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. But there does exist a cultural divide in this city, in this area, South Florida, even not just in Broward County, but in Dade and Palm Beach counties as well. And there's even cultural divides between the Hispanics and the blacks and the Caribbean communities that really just keeps us separated. And as you know, when you divide people, you're able to conquer them. And so in our efforts to move everybody forward in our discussion, we would just like to hear from our listeners. Our phone number to call is 954-533-6499. Again, that's 954-533-6499. And we'd like to hear from anybody who's out there listening to us today, what their perspective is on this issue.
So, yeah, I think what is really good is that we kind of outline what we're talking about. And as an attorney, as a journalist, media personality, I always like to define my terms because you can mean one thing by cultural divide and I can mean something totally different by cultural divide. So, Al, what do you mean when you say that you've experienced as someone coming from the Northeast? And how long have you been down here?
Just a year and a half.
Only a year and a half. So in that time, you've already picked up on something. So what have you picked up on?
Well, I picked up on the fact that the different communities, the different cultural communities, don't like to associate with other cultures. There's cultural places. There's places you go that are strictly kind of a Caribbean flavor, whether it's the Jamaicans, the Haitians, the Bahamians. They're just very divided up. And I get the fact that there's some cultural issues that make people want to be around people of their own culture. But what I'm suggesting in this conversation is that when we only do that, when we only stay within those small circles, we limit our ability to grow and develop the community as a whole. Particularly, I notice in Lauderhill, it has a large Jamaican population, and there's a few African Americans who still reside in the area, but there's a real divide between the African American culture and the Jamaican culture specifically. And I noticed that also in the church that I attend. We have a Jamaican pastor, Bishop Henry Fernandez, and when I talk to people about coming to visit us at the church, there's a little angst against going to a church where there's a Caribbean flavor to it, so to speak. And so that those kinds of discussions and comments just really kind of irked me a little bit, because I know where I'm from, up in the Northeast area, there isn't that separation isn't so prevalent, and it's not something that's even really noticed, but down here it's very noticeable.
Well, you open a can of worms, Al. I want to say what's up to a couple people that's chiming in on the Facebook Live before I kind of give my take. I want to say what's up to Casey Jackson, Lakeisha Jordan, what's up, guys? Nicole Parrish, Jerry Russian, what's up? Sean Davis, Kelvin Key, Andre Samuel, that's my classmate, and Chris Blue. All right, South Florida in the building on Mature Life Radio. So once again, Suzette Speaks here, and I have a guest. It is so multi-layered what you've just described, because there are parts that go beyond just using the broad term of culture. Within culture, you have an overlay, I think, and I would call that economics. And then also I think you have history. So I think there are various factors that are coming into play that in what we see now as the melting pot, or as you described, maybe not so much melting pot here in South Florida. Well, what I would say, I could just speak on what I've experienced growing up down here and how the changes of population that have occurred over the last 20 years or so. I know when my parents first immigrated to the United States, they did so by plane. Nobody came on a boat. I'm just FYI. Donald Trump might be listening. But anyway, so we came experiencing very rough political turmoil in Jamaica. It was like, that's that kill and shoot Jamaica that Chris Rock did a whole stand-up show on. It was a different Jamaica than what you see with Usain Bolt and all the people now. But anyway, so coming to look for literally peace, it was, I think one thing about immigrant populations, no matter what their skin tone, they are hungry for some sort of life that they were wanting to live where they're from, but they couldn't. And my parents were just that. Now, everybody comes as a different type of, I'm just telling you one, case study. But the desire to achieve that they brought with them, it was off the charts. I don't know, my dad left like a middle class background and came here. Thank you for a father like mine who would clean toilets at the county fair and would do, all kind of custodial jobs. Way beneath his education, but he didn't care. He had a family, he had kids to feed and all this and that. So you have a very interesting work ethic and mindset that comes with that. Now, if you are not necessarily literally trying to survive in a way of just coming to a new country, trying to rebuild your life, you will look at folks who have historically been deprived here as saying, well, if we came and in 20 years we got a house, we got a car, and our kids are in college, what's wrong with you? And I think there is a lot that is misunderstood about that, the answer to that question. And I think there's a lot of stereotypes and assumptions that are attached to that question. And I do think there is a lack of exposure to people who have lived the American dream, and as well as the history that allows immigrants to be here. So I think there's a lot of layers that we kind of have to peel back the onion. It's not just one part of culture, because I can tell you, we were right across the street from Dutch Pot, and African Americans be lining up in their cars trying to get that oxtail. Hello, somebody. So there's parts of the culture that everybody and I'm speaking of Caribbean culture, that I see beyond skin color, or should I say cultural differentiations we observe. I'd love to also talk about, when we talk about the first blacks in South Florida were from the Bahamas. The people who built Coral Gables, the people who built the first railroad that connected the whole coastline. And when you talk about original Floridians, we're really talking about what was called by our illustrious historian Zora Neale Hurston, the Nassaus. So when we look at Pompano, a lot of those folks are African American descendants of Bahamians. I have friends from Key West, the same thing, and they're what they would call, I don't like to say it, but I say black, because we get out here, we have vernacular for people who are born here, who maybe grandparents born here. Right. Even Frederica Wilson now, I never heard her say, but she was like, my grandma from the Bahamas. I was like, oh, really, Frederica? Like, no, much respect to the Congresswoman. I'm just saying it like that. I don't know her like that to be calling her by her first name, but I'm just saying there's been a melting pot, but it's I think of late, specifically for political expediency, people tend to label folks so that they can have a base. So if you never had a voice, because African Americans been voiceless, immigrants just now, like when I got here, there weren't that many Jamaicans here. I try to be African American as much as I can. And my mom used to tell me, as a little girl, I used to say, you want me to be Jamaican when I come home and African American when I go to school? Like, I was really confused. Right. But I say all that to say that I think there are political forces that, and I don't know if you're talking about the everyday person or the political class, that try to use, and I'm talking about politicians of color and white politicians that try to use Celtics.
Oh yeah, I mean everybody does, including me. I'll confess that. But the cultural divide that's here, I think, is set in an area where the Caribbean is right next door. The islands, South Florida is really so close. It's closer to the islands than it is community issues that are facing everybody. Impressions that you get when you have conversations with different people.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, I do know that there is some, it depends on which corridors you're talking about, different parts of living together we're referring to. But I do think there is, obviously, hopefully, cultural communities that can be bridges, a la churches, a la activities. to get robbed. Okay, New York has changed a lot, guys, so don't be as afraid as I was. But bottom line is, one thing I was able to observe was the egalitarian nature of the subway. Because New York is so crowded, you cannot drive, nor can you afford to even park your car if you could drive into the city. The poor man, the middle class man, and the rich man are all on that subway. I'm just saying that leaves out some